ladies, how are ya? Welcome to the Confident Yoga Teacher Bootcamp. I am your host, Crystal Gray. I'm the creator of this group and the founder of the Yoga Goddess Academy. I help women to become more confident yoga teachers, and some men sometimes, but usually it's women. So I've had so much fun leading this boot camp, this challenge over the past week, that I decided to do this bonus Q&A today because I want to answer just any questions that have came up, anything that I can help you with to help you decide, how you want to move forward, like with your business or what you need to work on with your teaching. Thank you all for hanging in there throughout this boot camp. I really hope that it's been bringing up a lot of stuff for you to get more, helping you to get more clarity on what you want to work on, where you feel maybe you need to have a little talk with your inner mean girl, all of that good stuff. And tomorrow I'll be answering any questions about the 500-hour program. But today it's really just all about you and how I can help you by answering your questions. All right, so I'm going to get started. I'm just going to dive in. If you guys have any questions as you are watching this, please feel free to put them in the comments, and I will either try to answer them now or I will try to answer them later, okay? But definitely put them in the comments because it's more likely that I'll answer it now. All right, so here is a question from Bethany. She says that she opened, it's kind of long, but she said that she opened up a studio and she would kind of get frustrated because, I'm paraphrasing, she would kind of get frustrated because she would, change the schedule around to try to suit different people's needs. And wow, like that really resonated with me because I have been there. I've owned a yoga studio and I know what it's like to continually ask people, hey, what time will work for you? And then, you think that you find this golden number, this golden time that will work for everybody, and then still nobody's showing up. And it's like, you want to shake them and be like, you said you were going to come at this time, and then it didn't happen. So what I would really recommend, anytime that you are planning your yoga classes, I want you to think about what time works best for you. Because if you're like me, I lead my boot camps at 8 a.m. Central Time. I know not everybody can be here at 8 a.m. Central Time. However, online, luckily you can watch the replay, but I know that I'm going to show up my best and I'm going to give my students the best at that time. So you want to try to find a balance in between, yes, when people can come, but make sure that it's a time that really works for you, where you will be energized, where you're going to be inspired. I like to practice yoga at night. Like I like to go take classes at night, but I don't necessarily like to teach at night or even in the afternoon. I really like to do it in the morning because I know that's when I'm going to show up the best. So then my other answer to Bethany would be what we talked about yesterday. We talked about how to make money as a yoga teacher. Instead of doing drop-ins, and I know that if you have a studio, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit harder to be like, okay, you have to sign up for a 6-week series or whatever, but I would just kind of blame it on COVID at this point and just say, this is what I have to do in order to protect myself and to make sure that I can pay the rent and all of that. Another thing that you can think about would be renting out your space, maybe either to other yoga teachers or to other practitioners, maybe other wellness practitioners. So that's another thing to think about. When people go through my trainings, I usually try to steer them away from having a studio, and it's really because of the things that I've learned and I've went through. Do I think studios can be successful? Sure, I do. And if that's really your dream, then that's awesome. I would encourage you, if you came to my training and said that that's what you're going to do and you're hell-bent on it, fine, then I'm going to help you to figure out how to do that. But it is stressful. It's stressful to figure out how you're going to keep paying for the rent month to month to month. I mean, it could be $1,000 on the low end, on the very low end per month. You're probably not going to get much lower than that for a space. So, Bethany, I hope that I answered a lot of your questions. All right, so now I'm going to move on to Pamela. She says, how to keep and stay motivated. I plan out classes and discussions for like online, but then she loses her momentum. I feel like I post questions and videos, but very limited feedback. Okay, so here's the thing, you guys. it's so much about consistency. I mean, you're not gonna show up maybe for 2-3 weeks and then have everybody be like, oh my God, let me take classes with you. How do I pay you? How do I give you money? How do I sign up? That's not usually how it's gonna happen. You have to be consistent over time. I mean, look at how long I've had this Facebook group. I've had it since 2016, right? So I've had the Yoga Goddess Collective since 2016, and I've been consistently showing up, I'd say pretty much every week, unless I was really going through something, but pretty much every week I would be showing up at least once live. So it's really about consistency and about knowing, again, who your target market is. But a lot of times, especially if you're talking about being in a Facebook group and you're making posts in a Facebook group and you're not getting a lot of feedback, sometimes I post things and I don't get any comments on it. You know, it just really depends. So another thing you could do is, if you do have a Facebook group, look and see when your people are the most active. You can actually go in there and look at, it's called engagement. So you can look at your engagement in your Facebook group and see when people are most active, and you can actually schedule posts for them. You don't have to actually be in your group at that time. You can schedule posts, okay? So that's one way to do that. So my answer to you, Pamela, is just consistency. Consistency, 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 knowing what your message is, knowing what your mission is, and knowing who you really want to serve, and that will really help. All right, and also because you got to think about, in Facebook groups and on social media, not everybody's going to see your post. So, you know, you're lucky if people see it. So don't worry about it. Just try to keep showing up. All right, now I've got one more question here on this thread. It's from Carol. She says, do you have students complete a release form? And do you have some form of insurance? Yes, 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 yes. You have to have insurance to teach, whether you're teaching online or you're teaching in person. I know some people that use B-Yogi, B-E-Y-O-G-I. I personally use something called CPH and Associates, just because I've been with them since the dawn of time. I've been with them. They kind of changed their names. That's what the Yoga Alliance recommended, I think, a long time ago. So that's what I got. I knew that they covered online teaching, so I just stayed with them, CPH and Associates. All right, and then as far as release forms, that wouldn't be a bad idea to have people do release forms. However, I would sign up for something called like HelloSign or DocuSign or something like that, so that you don't have all these pieces of paper laying around. That was my mistake whenever I first opened a studio. Although, I mean, that was a few years ago, so everything wasn't as digital as it is now. All right, I hope that answers your question. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit more of like mindset and teaching skills. So Vicky says, I have zero experience at live in-person yoga classes, and she's really nervous about teaching live and in person. Okay, here's the thing. I mean, and I've said this before during the training, you're not just going to wake up one day and be like, okay, yes, today I'm confident and ready to teach in front of people for the first time ever. You know, that's not going to happen. It happens over time. Do you think that I was like this comfortable doing lives the very beginning? Heck no, I was freaking scared in the beginning. I was scared to teach yoga. I wasn't like a natural born yoga teacher who's so excited to get up in front of people and talk. Yeah, right. I mean, that's not very many people. I don't think I've really had anybody go through my training that was like, oh yeah, I'm not worried about the lives at all. I'm not worried about any of that at all. I mean, everybody's scared shitless to do that, you guys. So don't worry about it. You are not alone. It just comes honestly from practice, from doing it. As soon as you graduate your program, I highly recommend that you keep going, okay? You start teaching classes immediately. Hey, Sarah, if you have any questions, just reminding you, if you guys have questions about teaching or about business, please feel free to put them in the comments so that I can answer them now. Right now, I'm just going through the questions that I have. Hope that answers your question, Vicky. Okay, so now I've got another one from Crystal. She says, no matter how much I pump myself up or talk positive to myself, I get very nervous in front of people, and that causes her asthma to kick in, and then that makes it really hard to talk and do movements. The other part of the nervous reaction is I sweat, but she can keep that under wraps by putting a headband on. Well, that's good. I'm glad that you found a solution to that. I mean, we've all got our things, right? And you'll figure out ways to help you through them. As far as, again, being nervous in front of people, I think that that really comes to knowing your value and knowing your worth as a yoga teacher. How are you helping your students? And if you've been teaching for a little while, why don't you ask your students? Ask your students, say, hey, how are my classes benefiting you? What do you really like about me as a teacher? How do you feel after class? So that by you asking them, you'll get some feedback and that will make you feel better about yourself. You'll be like, oh, I guess I am making people feel a little bit better after they leave my class, right? So there's nothing wrong with asking your students what they see in you that you probably don't see within yourself, okay? And again, that just kind of goes back to a question I answered previously. Practice, 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 and doing it over and over and over. And just knowing that you don't have to teach the most earth-shattering, freaking, amazingly sequenced yoga class that there ever was. Honestly, I've studied with Sean Korn a little bit. She's a super famous yoga teacher. And she'll teach the most basic yoga class. She doesn't, well, I don't know how she teaches now, but they were not fancily sequenced or anything. And you're just like, whoa, that class was amazing. You guys, it doesn't really have to do with having the most creative sequencing. It really has to do with your intention of helping students to feel better than when they walked in, helping them to feel safe and empowered and seen. That's really it. All right? Once you kind of do that, that's going to help you to feel a lot more empowered yourself whenever you're teaching classes. Yes, Kaylin says it's about holding space. That's totally, totally true. And Kaylin's really good at that. All right. And Terry says, I'm not good at talking in front of a lot of people. It gives me anxiety. So this is a common thing. This is a common thing here. And again, that just goes back to what I just said. Knowing your worth, knowing your value, asking your students, why do you come back to class with me? Or even if it's your family and friends or whatever, ask them, what do you like about me? And keeping your intention in mind. Write down what's the most important to you. Maybe it's holding space, making them feel seen, making them feel empowered, and whenever people come in, make eye contact with everybody. This is a really, really good teaching tip. Make eye contact with everybody. Make that connection so that it'll just help you to feel a lot less nervous if you make that connection whenever they first come in, rather than just be like, okay, I am separate from them. I am this yoga teacher and I have to deliver this. No. You are there to help them feel a little bit better than when they walked in, and you're there to hold space for them and to what are your intentions? So I would think about writing that down and maybe bring that with you. Bring that with you to every class and just be like, all right. And before class too, I like to go into the bathroom, close my eyes, take a couple deep breaths, and just pray that whatever needs to come through me today will come through me. So just speak through me, my higher self or whatever, speak through me so that they can hear what they need to hear today. And then that takes it off of you. We've got to get our ego out of it. Let's take it off of us and put it back onto the students and onto our higher self and let whatever flow through, right? Because that's really what we want to do. It's not about us. It's not about us. Okay, here's a good one. Sanskrit. All right, so you guys, your students don't care about Sanskrit usually. Unless they want to be a yoga teacher, they don't really care about it, and they don't know it. They do not know Sanskrit. I mean, I wonder, I should just do like a test sometime where I go in there and just say the complete wrongest Sanskrit and see if anybody says anything to me. Because I don't know about you, but whenever I was just a student before I went through a 200-hour teacher training, I mean, everything just went in one ear and out the other. None of the Sanskrit ever stuck. None of the Sanskrit ever stuck. Yesterday I said I flued it or something. I don't know. I totally used the wrong past tense. All right, Kaylin says, clarify and connect with your intentions before class. Yes, exactly. And that, again, will take the pressure off of you. Take it off of your ego. Okay, so again with the Sanskrit, I mean, what I did whenever I was a newer teacher was I just tried to learn. I was like, okay, this week I know I'm going to be teaching in my classes Warrior 1 and Warrior 2. So I'm just going to make sure that I get that Sanskrit down for these two poses. And then that would be like in my arsenal, right? That'd be my arsenal of Sanskrit words. And then the next week I'd pick another two to really focus on and let sink in. Then that would be in my arsenal. Okay, so I would just use that every time. And then write it down. Write it down on your notes. Yes, bring your sequence to class. Write it down on there, and even write it down with the pronunciation if you need to. That's in my trainings. I have all of them recorded now and pronounced so that you can hear how I say them. But also, you can just write out how it's actually pronounced, right? So you guys don't worry about Sanskrit. I do love Sanskrit because I think it's a really beautiful way to honor the yoga tradition, right? And not to, it's just another way to keep the history, I think, of it alive. And so that's why I personally like to do it. But, I mean, don't stress about it. Nobody's going to be like, oh, she's not a good enough teacher because she doesn't use Sanskrit, right? Because certain people aren't going to resonate with Sanskrit anyway. So if that's not your jam, it's not your jam. But if you like it, just try it. You got to start somewhere. And then she says proper alignment and cueing. All right, so, I mean, proper alignment, I've talked about this before. This really comes a lot from being able to, you've got to be able to embody the poses yourself. All right, so if you didn't go through a training where you got feedback on your poses, maybe that's something you want to invest in. I don't know, either with coaching, or maybe you want to go through another teacher training program, or maybe you want to go to an in-person class with a teacher that is really good at alignment, that you've heard is really good at alignment, right? Ask if there's somebody in your area. Maybe you can get a private with that teacher. Okay? Kaylin says, I love Sanskrit, but yeah, you're so right. Most students don't know it, and it's a fine line between honoring the history of yoga and alienating people. That's exactly right, Kaylin, and that's what I was trying to say. And it's really going to depend on your style of a teacher. I mean, I also really like chanting and things like that, but I'm not going to like bust that out in a yoga class here in my tiny little town, right? I'm not going to do that. Good morning, Vanessa, and hi, Sarah. All right. So again, with the proper alignment, really just about learning that yourself, feeling it in your body. And you guys, I heavily focus on alignment. I've got tons of YouTube classes. So go take some of my yoga classes, and I talk about alignment a lot. And try not to let it go in one ear and out the other. Listen, absorb it, learn it. And then whenever you have it embodied, you will be able to then teach it to other people, because you're basically just going through it yourself, right? And saying what you would need to do to get into the alignment. You're not memorizing. So again, going back to that memorization versus embodying. All right, so Natalie, I hope that answered your questions. Woo, I'm getting out of breath. All right. Mandy says, I'm lacking experience in education. Her 200-hour was a joke and left her with so many gaps in her education. Well, I mean, here's the thing. Yeah, yoga teacher trainings, they run the gamut, and they always have. It's not just like, oh, now there's all these online programs and a lot of them aren't really very good. I mean, that's honestly always been the case, even with in-person programs. You can have just as bad of an in-person program as you can online. On the other hand of that, on the other side of that, you can have just as good of an online program as you can in person. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. If you take any classes with my students, you will see that they are kick-ass teachers, because I know how to teach online. Take a program with someone who knows how to teach online, and you'll be fine. Okay, but to answer your question, Mandy, about lacking experience and education, there's always going to be more to learn. I'm lacking in some areas, and I've been teaching for 16 years, okay? But I admit it. That's the thing. Again, let's get out of the ego and don't feel like you have to know everything. Tell your inner mean girl to shut up. You don't have to know everything, and you never will. You never will know everything. You just got to focus on what you think is important and what you like teaching and what you like focusing on. And if that's not enough for somebody, then that's why it's good to have a niche so so that you can also refer them. So get into a community, and that's why I really like my programs too. I'm sorry, but I mean, there's other programs out there that are like this, but that are really heavily focused in the community. Like, I know what each and every one of my students focuses on, mainly in the 500-hour program. Some of the people that went through my 200 do have a strong focus too, like Sarah with the brain injury, but a lot of times it takes you going through that 500-hour to really hone in on who you want to teach and how you want to make your living. And so it's really important to have that community so that you can refer people out, because you don't have to be able to teach everybody, because that's going to drain you. To be like, oh, well, you know, this week I have somebody who's pregnant. Next week I've got somebody who's got a brain injury. Then the next week I've got somebody who's got a bulging disc in whatever disc it's in, right? Like, because you're gonna have to like look up how to teach all of those people, and that takes a lot of time. That's gonna take a lot more time than planning a regular class. But if you have your niche, you're just gonna know all that stuff. You're gonna know how to teach the people that are gonna be coming in. And if you don't feel prepared, then you can recommend them to go to someone else, okay? Oh, Vanessa, I can't wait for you to take it either. You'll do really good in it. Okay. And I think it's Ann Leon. She says, something you mentioned was being able to teach intuitively. I'm just starting to reach that point, but I have my little cheat sheet with me just in case. I do think that the more you teach and practice yourself, the better and better that will become. Yeah, for sure. But I highly encourage you to plan out all your classes. Yes, I can throw together something and teach it, but I don't normally do that. I will do that for the recovery center that I teach at, because first of all, it's revolving students. So you only get the same students, maybe if you're lucky, 4 classes or 4 weeks in a row. All right. And so I've been teaching again for like 16 years. So I know I've got those sequences ingrained in my head. I know exactly what I can do. But if you have been teaching, I would say 4 years or less, don't do that. But second of all, if I'm going to like teach a class where it's like a weekly class where I've had students that are coming to me, you know, if it's like at a studio, like how you would teach at a studio, I'm going to plan my class, because I want them to know that I put time into it, that I thought about my theme, that I thought about what I'm going to talk about, that I put some care into it. It doesn't mean that you have to stick to it, right? But you've got that class plan there. Then that's your guide. But then you feel comfortable, but then you have room to be intuitive, because you have that confidence that you've got your plan there. Okay? And that's really, really important. Let's see what Kaylin says. Kaylin says, it's hard for me to click the little see more button. She says the 500 hours where I got really comfortable with alignment and cueing, having a mentor and supportive container made all the difference. Thanks, Kaylin. I appreciate that. It really does make a difference to have that mentorship program, to have that mentorship piece. Yes, plan your classes. Totally. And it's okay if they change, right? I plan out my YouTube classes, and then I'll be like, ooh, that didn't make sense, because I'm not at the point where I still have to write out my sequence and then try it. I mean, sometimes, maybe, but not usually, because I just know in my mind what will work together. Again, because I've been teaching for so long. All right, I hope that answered your question, Ann Leon. Now moving on to Shannon. She basically says the same thing as the one before. So yes, exactly. So then we just got to focus and a topic, and we can bring that in. And you guys, you can, a lot of times, after you've been teaching for a while and you've got I put all my sequences in Google Docs, because then that way I can print them out and really find them easily. Like I'll be like, you know, I'll title it beginner yoga sequence anxiety, or intermediate sequence whatever it is, full moon, I don't know. So then that way I can easily find it. And then you guys, you can reuse those sequences and just change the theme up, change the affirmation, change up the readings. And that'll make it like an entirely different class. Your students wouldn't even know probably that it was the same sequence if you changed that stuff out. All right. Chrissy says, I have been teaching about 5 years, and when I first started teaching, my lack of experience dictated that my classes were very simple and easy to follow. And this is a little bit long, but I think that she's talking about, she kind of got stuck in that rut of being that teacher that teaches these simple flows. And I want to remind you guys, again, just like I said in the beginning, that it's not about having these super creative, funky flows. I practice with someone who on YouTube, I'm not going to say the name, and I really like her, but that's because I'm an experienced teacher, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that, because some of the things, it's like it gets so creative that it doesn't make sense anymore. It doesn't make sense in the body. It doesn't feel good, and honestly, a lot of times I don't feel as good after taking one of those classes as I would after taking one of my classes that was really thought about, that was sequenced in a specific way, right? Because I feel like my body just really works well with how I sequence. But I wouldn't worry about that so much. She says, do I just need to accept that I'm not a flowy vinyasa teacher? I mean, I would personally, Chrissy, I would go take some other yoga classes. I mean, take yoga classes on YouTube. Go to in-person classes if you can. Take as many classes as you can from other teachers and see what you can, not steal, but what you can borrow from them. That's everything that we do as yoga teachers pretty much is borrowed from somewhere or other, right? All right, so I hope that answers your question, Chrissy. I wouldn't worry about that too much, honestly. I bet your classes are amazing. And the thing is, too, I think sometimes we confuse what we like to practice with what we think we should be teaching. So just because something that we necessarily like to practice might not be what we teach. I've got someone who went through my 200-hour a long time ago, Tammy. She actually teaches restorative now in my 500-hour. She's amazing. And she wasn't huge into restorative whenever she first started, but it's like that's what everybody wanted from her. And she liked it. And now that's morphed into, that's what she does. That's what she teaches along with meditation and journaling. So it's just really amazing. And it's really important to be open to what do your students like to learn from you and what do you love to teach? And finding that intersection, right? Finding where those intersect. So that was a lot of information. I hope that I answered a decent amount of your questions. She says, Christina talks about sequencing properly up to a challenge pose. So basically what you want to do whenever you're doing that is thinking about what body parts need to be stretched and strengthened before that pose. And also what shape. So I talk about muscle memory a lot. If you're going to be making a certain shape, say in King Dancer, you would be going like this with your arms reaching back and grabbing your foot. So in the beginning of class, I might do something like this, where this is very basic tricep stretch, right? But also getting into the shoulders and the chest a little bit, because later we're going to be grabbing back, reaching back like this and grabbing the foot. So it's like muscle memory. So doing poses like that are kind of the same shape. All right, so then you want to work your way up to that pose, do smaller versions of it, warm yourself up, and then after it, you want to bring yourself down from that, so cool yourself down. So in my yoga teacher trainings, I teach something called, I just named it the other day, and I call it the Yoga Hump. All right, so it's basically like a bell curve. It goes like this. All right, so what you want to do is you're going to start out cool, calm, and collected, right? And then you're going to move them up, then you're going to warm them up, and then just a little bit after that hill, that's whenever you start going down that hump, that's where I put in my pinnacle pose. And then you're going to bring it back down and calm them down, and then you're done, right? Kaylin says, I love sweaty, active practice, Ashtanga, but my ideal clients need more slow flow, gentle yoga. Totally. And that's pretty much usually how mine is how my students are as well. I teach a very, very basic in-person class at the Recovery Center where I teach, and that's not what I practice. But that's what I teach because that's what they need and they love it. So and the same thing goes with studios here. Most people in the studios around here it's a little bit different. I haven't taught in a studio now for a while since COVID and everything, but I'm not usually teaching handstands and things like that, though that's what I practice. but most people, even in an intermediate class in my area, that's not really the focus. Though, I don't know, that might be changing a little bit. So, all right. Whew, again, I'm out of breath. So I hope that helped answer your question. Thank you guys so much for being on. Tomorrow I'm going to do one last final hurrah live, and I'll be answering any and all of your questions about my online 500-hour yoga teacher training. All right, you guys have a great day. Thanks so much for the hearts. Thank you guys for being here. I really love your support. Bye.